Excited to be here. Oh, meeting is being recorded. I think I'm going to click continue. Fabulous. Hi, everybody. I hope that you're having an absolutely wonderful day and you're learning a ton. I heard there was like a really emotional, beautiful session this morning. We've got our economic outlook. And now today, what we're going to be talking about is some of the tools that you can look to build your own personal wealth, maybe beyond your business or beyond real estate, which is something that you all have an expertise in. That being said, there are other ways to build independent wealth. And I'm going to be talking about some of those tools. I'm going to be talking through some of these financial concepts. So many of them, which by the way, we really should be learning. Like if I had a dime for every time somebody said like, I wish I had learned that in high school, like why didn't anybody teach me that in college? And so we're going to be covering all sorts of really great topics about investing and building wealth. And so do feel free to use the chat bar as we move throughout the presentation. Just so you know, I don't always watch the chat bar throughout just because like I'm fully concentrated and giving you this information. That being said, if there's time at the end of the session, I would really love to do some Q&A. Again, that's going to be time permitting. So definitely either jot those questions down or if it helps, throw them into the chat. And then, yeah, I mean, speak amongst yourselves. I want this to be totally interactive. I want us to actually have fun because I know so often this topic can be like just so crusty and dusty and it really doesn't need to be. And so here I am riding the Wall Street bull. I always like to say, hey, Wall Street, there's a new sheriff in town. That sheriff is a me. And so I like to really mix it up, talk about these topics in a way that is totally new, totally accessible, and lacks the type of condescension that we often feel and that we often get from the wealth management industry, because so often the wealth management industry is run by folks who are already wealthy white men, Wall Street bros, you know, who want to know more than you about the stock market. And so I'm here to shake it up a little bit. My goal for well, honestly, myself and for the world at large is I want to live in a world that is just chock full of financially confident women. And so that's what we're trying to do bit by bit, Zoom presentation by Zoom presentation, is get this information into the arms of the people that I want to have this information. So very often for me, that's going to be women. I work a lot with young women. I work with immigrant families. You know, I really just anybody who has felt left out of these conversations, because so often these conversations are reserved for people who are already wealthy. And so this is my dream for us. Really quickly about me, my business is called Invested Development. That's where I do live teaching. I also have a blog that's called the Dumpster Dog Blog, which you can read about how it got that name on the blog. And then I do tons of free investing education. Most of the blogging, the microblogging, and the free education is happening over on Instagram at dumpster.doggy. But enough about me. We are not here to talk about me. We are here to talk about you. And in particular, we are here to talk about one very specific version of you. We are here to talk about future you. Future you who is going to want to have some fun, who's going to maybe want to travel, or maybe not. Maybe you're going to want to lock yourself away in a cabin with your colony of cats or whatever it may be, never to talk to anybody again. Whatever your badass granny future self dream is, we want to make that a reality. And so I really encourage you to actually spend a little bit of time thinking about yourself in your 70s, in your 80s, in your 90s and beyond, and think about what is it that I want for myself in those years? Because at a bare minimum, what you need is to be able to take care of yourself in retirement. We have a moral obligation to our present selves. Like, right, we know we got to be taking care of ourselves right now, but we also have a moral obligation to our future selves. And the reason that I bring up this exercise is I just think it makes navigating through some of this, again, dusty financial material, like just a little bit more tolerable, is if we keep a face on the process, and that face is just an adorable, slightly wrinklier version of the face that you've got now. So I, in particular, like to use the Golden Girls as my muses, because these ladies basically like hanging out with each other and making fun of each other, which is like pretty much me and my friends, that's our passion. And so I like to think of the Golden Girls often. I like to think of my future self often because, again, this is what we're doing it for. It's not for the compound returns. Well, it is for the compound returns. You know, it's not because we necessarily enjoy investing, but it's because we want to take care of our future selves. And so, before I really dive into some of the building blocks here, I do want to say that for some of you, I know that some of you are extremely financially savvy. And so some of this might be a review. If you walk away from this talk knowing everything that I covered, then good for you. Pat yourself on the back because you are in really great financial shape. That being said, for me, having a really strong grasp of the basics is so much more important than having some like understanding of more advanced ancillary topics. And so just so you know, some of this, especially for some of you who are so savvy and already understand investing conceptually, do be aware. So something that's maybe a little obvious to say is that saving and investing equals freedom. I kind of like to swap out the word retirement for financial independence, right? Really what we're trying to do is reach a place where we are financially independent enough to do whatever it is that we want to do. Maybe that's walk away from a job altogether. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just finding more meaningful work. Both of those are going to require some sort of financial freedom, some financial independence. And that is only going to be accomplished by doing the hard work of saving and then investing. Luckily, investing can be so much easier than the saving part is way harder. The investing part can be super, super easy. And we'll cover some of that. So here's something that I think is maybe a little bit misunderstood about the idea of retirement is not an age. Retirement is not age 65. Retirement is an amount of money saved. You only get to walk away from work if you have enough money to be able to walk away from work. And so again, this is really what we're talking about, is figuring out different ways that we can reach a point where we have financial independence, where we have financial freedom. And that's the methodologies are going to look a little bit different for all of us. Like, for example, for me, right now, I am heavily invested in my business and in the stock market investing. I will add real estate to this mix, and that will be my trifecta. Now, what you want to do might be a little bit different than that, but I think it's a good idea for all of us to seriously consider some diversification of our different investments. And since you already got real estate, you should be teaching me about real estate. I'll cover the other stuff. And so here's what we're going to be covering today. First, I'm going to do just a little quick hype for you, why we need to invest. And then we're going to talk about what should I work on first. And then the biggest block of what we're covering today is the building blocks of investing. And so that's what we're going to be covering. So first, reasons why we need to invest. So here's a timeline that when I first saw it really helped me to put things into perspective, right? Like if you don't even worry too much about the numbers themselves, like even if you kind of like sit down back and squint your eyes and just look at the colors, what you'll notice is that there are almost as many years in green as there are in pink. Right? So there are just as many years where you are not working or retired as there are when you are working. And so if you're looking at this and you're like, oh my goodness, but like, okay, I have to save for two different lifetimes, the lifetime while I'm working and the lifetime while I'm retired, but I only have one income. Well, what does that mean? Because you've got to make your income essentially work for both. And so if you're looking at this and you're like, I mean, does this mean I need to be saving half of my income? Well, you know that that's not the case. You understand intuitively the power of investing, and investing is going to help us with a lot of the heavy lifting to getting to a place where we can afford 20 or 30 years of retirement, which, by the way, when we're talking about retirement, you absolutely have to assume that you're going to live to be 100. Saving for retirement would be super easy if we knew when we were going to die, but we don't know when we're going to die. And so we have to assume it's actually more conservative to assume that we're going to live a really long time. And then, of course, women live longer than men, which means that we're going to need to save more. This is so difficult to do because women are also paid less on the whole than men, yet we need to have more in retirement. And it can feel a little bit frustrating, but like the good news is like we know what we're up against. as women, we never thought it was going to be easy for us. And so we just have to buckle down and do the work. And so here's something that I know all of you know intuitively. How can we make money? There's really two ways to make money. And I think somebody might need to go on mute, unless that's me. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. So maybe everybody just check and make sure they're on mute real quick. Two ways to make money. Really, that's it. The first is exchanging our time for money. That's a paycheck. That's a job. We're all very familiar with that. The second way is figure out a way to have our money make us money. That's what investing is at its core. And so if we ever want to get to a point where we are no longer exchanging our time for money, well, then we had better figure out a way to have our money make us money. Again, that's what investing is. And here's our last reason why you need to be investing, why you need to be thinking about investing. Compound returns. So compound returns essentially mean that you are earning a rate of return, not only on the money that you invested, but also all previous profits. So like I made a little bit of profit last year, and in the next year, I'm going to earn a rate of return on both what I invested and that profit. And what happens is it works like an exponential return where your growth increases at an increasing rate. And so here's one of these graphs you see around all of the time, which kind of shows you the power of compound returns and getting started as early as possible. Like, I really don't think that anybody on this call is 21, but it's just the idea here. The motivation is to get started as soon as you can, no matter how old you are. So what you'll see here in the graph is that there's two different people. First, the person in green, who is investing between the ages of 21 and 41. Their total investment during that time period is $24,000. Same idea with the person in blue, except for they are starting at age 47, but they are investing the exact same amount of money. But assuming both of these investors get an 8% rate of return until the age of 67, look how much more money the younger person accumulates because of the power of compound returns. Right? You'll start to see it get like slope up. Like you want to ride that curve when it starts to get vertically. Now, if you're looking at this and you're like, okay, well, I don't have this many years to be investing. Well, the good news is your retirement age is not a drop dead date. Age 67 is not a drop dead date where you will no longer invest and you will no longer earn compounding returns. You might adjust your strategy, of course, to account for the fact that now you're kind of maybe less in growth mode and you're more interested in producing income to live off of, but you'll still be invested. You can't just liquidate that entire portfolio and put it in cash at age 65 and hope that it's going to last you until 95. No, we're going to need to keep compounding returns working in our favor, not just up until retirement, but through retirement as well. And so again, this is just your rally cry to get started, because even getting started with small amounts, it does matter. And the sooner, the better. Absolutely, the sooner, the better when we're talking about compound returns. Which, by the way, compound returns are something that you would more or less automatically earn on something like a stock. It's kind of easy to visualize it, because with a stock, which we'll be covering like what is a stock in a minute, it's really just like a teeny tiny little piece of ownership in some company. And what is happening is it is growing with each passing year. Not really at each passing year, but on most years it's growing. And so next year, if my stock grew this year, or my investment in the stock market grew this year, next year I'm going to be earning a rate of return on all of that profit in addition to what I invested. If you kind of don't understand compound returns, I totally understand. It's like a little bit of like a wonky topic to wrap your head around. Reach out to me and I will provide you with some more resources that you can actually get to understand compound returns with, because it's super important. And we definitely all want to be harnessing the power of compounding returns. All right, next, and this is going to be a super quick one. By the way, I move fast because I want to cover as much as I possibly can and give as much to you as I possibly can in this hour. Do be aware that you will be provided with these slides. And so no need to like write everything down. You'll get these slides. Okay, so a question that I get all of the time is, what should I work on first? Should I be investing or should I be paying off this debt? Which should come first in my, what I call financial order of operations? And so, of course, personal finance is personal. And so what you work on first is largely going to need to be determined by you and your goals. That being said, there is definitely an order that most financial experts and most financial planners would agree upon. And it looks something like this. First things first, your first order, your first few buckets that you need to be working on is saving up some emergency money, right? If this year has taught us anything, it's that having emergency money is super important, super useful. Now, how much emergency money you keep depends on your personal situation. It's often recommended that 6 months worth of like really stripped down expenses, just like I got to stay alive for the 6 months. I was laid off from my job. 6 months is about how long it takes to get rehired when you get laid off from a job. But like, you know, you're on like a ramen noodle type of budget. So 6 months worth of expenses is a really popular recommendation. I actually tend to be a little bit more conservative because as a freelancer, the nature of my job is so tenuous. I'm on extremely shaky ground. And so I actually like to keep closer to a year. That being said, you don't have to have a year's worth of cash, which is like a pretty big goal. Let's be totally honest. Anybody that pretends like that's not a huge goal is not living on this planet. And so you don't have to have it all to get started investing, but like definitely have enough that you are going to then be able to sleep at night and be super comfortable knowing that with the money you're investing for the long term, you are going to be subjecting it to an investment that is volatile. And so what you need is to make sure you've got enough cash that you can tap into so you're not worried about touching those investments at the wrong time. And so get your emergency money. That's one of the most important goals. And if that's what you walk away from this talk, being like, you know what, I want to save up a little bit more emergency cash, that's awesome. Next, credit cards. If you're carrying credit card balances, a really great financial goal is to like get those paid off. Ideally, we're paying those off in full every month. And the reason for that is credit cards have an exorbitant rate of interest. The average rate of interest on a credit card is 16, 17, 18%, but can go all the way up to nearly 30%. And so that's money you're essentially just bleeding out in credit card interest. And so if our ultimate goal is to build wealth, then we got to get the credit cards off the balance sheet. Those got to go. And so that's another really good goal. If you're trying to walk away from this talk with something to work on, let's pay off those credit cards. And then of course, if you've got student loans, if you've already got a mortgage payment, you're making those payments, right? Make sure you've got a plan and you're making those payments, and those are kind of just like a bill, right? And so that's what we're doing for those. And then what comes next? What comes next is actually, well, you keep making those student loan payments, you keep making whatever mortgage payments you have, of course. And then we actually want to start integrating in retirement investing. And, you know, a lot of times people are like, excuse me, like I am 25, 35, 45 years old. Like I'm just trying to find a place to live. I'm trying to raise a family. Like now you're telling me I got to save money for when I'm 90 years old. And like, I never love to be the messenger, because I know that it can be really, I mean, let's be honest, it can be kind of like painful to like add one more thing to my plate. Like we've all already got so much, but I think it's important that we really come to terms with this as soon as we can, because otherwise we're going to be leaving our future self high and dry. And that's not what we want to do. Retirement comes next, because retirement, if we get to have these wonderful 20+ year retirements, they are going to probably be the single most expensive thing we will ever save for in our lifetimes. More expensive than a home, right? You think of how expensive it is to live for 1 year with no income. Think of how expensive it is to live for 20 years or more with no income. And because it's such a big goal, what we want to do is try to bake it into every year that we can, right? As women, we're not going to be able to do it every year. That's just the reality. But every year that we possibly can, try to integrate it into your financial plan. You will not regret it later. And so what I always like to say, like I always get like kind of the question of like, okay, well then should I invest or should I pay off, this student loan that has like an 8% rate of return? What we got to do is we always just got to compare interest rates, right? Whenever you're making a financial trade-off decision, really just like compare interest rates. So what could you expect to earn versus what are you paying? Credit cards are kind of a no-brainer because there's really no investing combination in the entire world that outpaces the interest that you are bleeding out in credit card interest. So for example, earning, a rate of return on stocks, real estate, bonds, cash. Maybe it's your antique Beanie Baby collection, your toast that looks like Jesus, that Cabo timeshare. No matter what combination of investments you choose out there in the investing world, it's probably not going to earn you, again, what you are paying in credit card interest. Now, when you're comparing rates of return that are more similar, like maybe you would expect, again, to earn an 8% rate of return or earn a 7% rate of return investing, and then your debt is also like a 7% rate of return or an 8% rate of return, what should you do? Well, first of all, nothing is all or nothing. You could certainly actively work on both, right? Or you go with what makes the most sense to you. Like, for example, does the debt make you feel like crap? Is it emotionally stressful? Then let's hit that first. If you feel like, you know what, I got the debt, it just feels like another bill to me, it's managed, I don't want that debt to stop me from building my own personal wealth, then that's great too. Either one of those options are great. I think that the real trick here is just to be proactively working on something. All right, so let's get into the big bulk of what we're going to be covering today, the building blocks of investing. So here's what we're going to be covering with the building blocks of investing. First, let's talk about account types. Next, we're going to talk about understanding asset allocation. That's jargon, but don't worry, I will clear it all up. It's the only jargon that I like to use. We're going to talk about investing as a risk and reward trade-off, and then we're going to cover some basics of the stock market. And so first, let's talk about accounts. So when we're talking about accounts, we're talking about 401k, IRA, SEP IRA, Roth 401k, Roth IRA, all of these crazy accounts with these crazy account names, and they're so confusing. There's so many of them. Which one am I supposed to be using is a question I probably get more than any other. Is it, should I be using a 401k or should I be using a Roth IRA, and so on. But first, just let's talk about organization of our accounts. So we all understand a checking account, savings account. I just like to use personally a high yield savings account. I personally use Marcus by Goldman Sachs. They pay you a small rate of interest, but that's not, honestly, the interest that you can earn on cash, you're not lighting the world on fire with the interest that you earn on cash right now. So yes, do it, earn that interest, but avoid maybe don't spend too much energy chasing yield because the yields are extremely low. I like Marcus by Goldman Sachs and some of these more online only banks because I can open different accounts or open up subcategories for my different goals, which makes it so much more motivating to actually do the saving. So for example, I have my emergency fund I keep in cash at my bank account. I have a down payment fund. I do a travel fund. I don't do a holiday fund because I don't get anybody presents, but I don't have kids. You might need to do a holiday fund. I don't do a holiday fund. No presents for me. None from the dumpster doggy. I also have just a foolishness fund. You never know when the mood is going to strike to buy a life-size lava lamp or something, and I want to budget for it. I'm an idiot with money sometimes too. And so I like to account for that. And so I love having the different accounts for different goals, and they're free. It's not like at a Bank of America where they're going to charge you $15 a month if you don't have a certain amount of money in that account. And so it makes banking a whole lot more accessible. I am not paid by Marcus by Goldman Sachs. If anybody knows them and they want to pay me, that's great. They're also not the only option. There are plenty of really cool, really great online only banks, and that just happens to be my preference for my savings. All right, now let's move to the other side of the chart, the brokerage account. A brokerage account is just like a normal old investing account, just like a normal old place where you can buy, sell, and trade stocks, bonds, ETFs, investments. You can buy the fancy stuff. If you need to, a remembering device, just think of the word stockbroker, right? A brokerage account is just a bank account, but for investments. And so why then are retirement accounts separate? Because retirement accounts are also hypothetically a brokerage account. It is a place where you can buy, sell, and trade investments. And in fact, you will want to within your retirement account. And so why does it exist separately? Like, who are you, 401k Roth IRA? Well, they are separate because the IRS done this to us. You are getting some sort of tax advantage no matter which one of those accounts that you use. And that's why they are separate from a regular old brokerage account. And so I'm going to use like 401k as a catch-all, but like here are some benefits to using some sort of retirement account. You know, whether it's going to be through your work, like a 401k is like through your work, a 403b is through your work, or it's one that you open up yourself. So like I, as a freelancer, have opened up a solo 401k, and you can do that as well. 401ks are not the only type of accounts. We'll get more into this, but it's the most common. And so why use one? Well, first of all, if you traditionally employed, I heard it's like a nice melting pot of like people who are traditionally employed and people who are kind of on their own and have to do their own thing. And so we'll talk about both. But one of the reasons, especially if you are traditionally employed, that it's great to use a 401k is that money is taken right out of your paycheck, is deposited into the 401k, and it's automatically invested for you, which may not seem like an advantage, but trust me, it is an advantage. It is all done for us, which is a miracle, right? Like take one chore off of my chore list, please. And this is a really great way to automate your investing, which is something that's really important for success over time. And so take it right out of the paycheck, get it away from my checking account, because if it lands in my checking account, I'm going to get my grubby little hands on it and I'm going to spend it. So that's a benefit. You may or may not get a company match. That's where when you put money in, your company matches. And in fact, right now, if you currently work for a company that offers a match, I would love for you to share what your match program is, just so all of the other people on this call can get an idea of what is being offered out there. Because, right, like if your company offers a 6% match, that is a 6%, that's 6% of your salary, right? Like that's a 6% pay increase. People love to call a company match free money, but it is not free money. That is money that was that is owed to you as part of a contract for working at your company. And so you got to go and get it. But generally what happens is you have to contribute first. You have to save first for that benefit to be activated. And so go get your company match if you have one. So many of us, like me, don't get a company match. And I want a company match. I want that. I want those corporate dollars. Another reason why you want to use a 401k is you can invest the money, of course. But again, that's not what makes these accounts unique, because you can also just invest in a brokerage account. Because the real thing that makes these accounts unique is you're getting some sort of tax incentive. You are getting some sort of tax benefit if you use any one of these accounts. So the good news is no matter which one you land on, you are getting some sort of tax benefit. And so when we're talking about retirement accounts, I like to organize them in my brain in one of two ways. So the first way I like to organize retirement accounts is by asking, who's opening this account? Is it my employer or is it going to be me? And so here are the most common options for either. So if you've got a company, which like also, if you've got one of these accounts, I would love for you to share it in the chat as well. Just again, so people can kind of start to understand what is being offered and what is out there. 401k is going to be your most common corporate plan. 403bs are for like governmental employees. Same with 457As. Roth 401k is a version of the 401k. And so these are plans that you would look to open, or sorry, that your company would open on your behalf. Now, you'll see here down at the bottom, I say Roth IRA open yourself, because it is an account that you can open on the side, even if you've got a 401k, even if you've got that simple IRA, even if you've got a 403b, it is an additional account that you can use, and it pairs really nicely with a company plan. But that's if you qualify for the Roth IRA. I'll come back to that. Now, if you are self-employed like me, you can do a Roth IRA, a SEP IRA, a solo 401k, or a traditional IRA. I personally do a mix of a Roth IRA and a solo 401k. Another really cool option is to do a mix of a Roth IRA and a SEP IRA. And you can have both, and you can do both. Or don't overwhelm yourself and just start with one. Start with one of these options. Now, like I mentioned, the IRS done us a little bit dirty here and gave them all their own different rules. And so do be aware of what the rules are and make sure that you actually qualify to use that specific type of account. Now, something that I really wanted to offer to all of you for free is I have 2 workshops, and one is for like, what account should I use if I'm self-employed and doing it on my own? And I have another workshop that's like, how do I actually understand my company retirement plan? And I want to make them free for you, and I'll share them at the end of class. And so that'll get into like the nitty gritty of helping you decide which one makes the most sense for you. But because it is kind of like a little bit of an in-depth topic, we have to talk about IRS rules and all that fun stuff. And so I don't have time today to cover it all, but I want to offer that to you at the end of class. But really, no matter which account that you're using, I want you to think of them as if it's just an adult caboodles. And what do I mean by that? A 401k, a Roth IRA, a SEP IRA is not an investment. It is not an investment. It is just an account that holds investments. It's just a place where you store your stuff. It's just a place where you store your treasures. Now, the treasures that you hold inside your caboodles, those are your investments. So that's going to be like your stocks, your bonds, your ETFs, your target date funds. Those are investments. That's what's going to create a rate of return for you, because also you could just have one of these accounts and have the money sitting in cash. Again, because these accounts are really nothing more than fancy bank accounts that hold investments and give you some sort of tax advantage. And so you can just think of them as a storage unit, right? Think of them as the garage. The investments are the car that you park inside the garage, and the car is going to be what drives your returns over time. I love a caboodles. I feel like every like powerful adult woman either had a caboodles or wanted a caboodles when she was young. I mean, like they're so good, right? And so retirement account part 2. Okay, so like the second way that you can divide or organize retirement accounts in your brain, the first way is who's opening the account. The second way is by taxation, because we're dealing with 2 different forms of taxation. There is tax deferred, and that's like the majority, like almost all of the accounts are going to be tax deferred. But there's also another type called Roth accounts. So Roths are the ones that stand alone. And so to help you remember this, I have David Lee Roth here. So just remember David Lee Roth, that's the one that stands on his own at the party, different from all the rest. And all of the others are taxed under this like more traditional model of tax deferral. Let me check my time really quickly because I'm going to do it. I'm going to go into the taxation of each. Sometimes I have time to do this. Sometimes I don't, but I think we have enough time to get through this. And so let's just talk about the taxes real quick. The taxes for tax deferred accounts and then for Roth accounts. So this flow chart that you see, imagine that it's like your paycheck being deposited into your account. That's the box in the middle. And then on the way out, that's what you're spending on. So the giant margarita, that's what you're spending your money on. And then the dollar signs, those are going to be your paycheck. So paycheck deposited into the account and then withdrawing that money. So first in that top row here, up here, that's just going to be your like regular checking account, your savings account, your brokerage account. So like when your paycheck is deposited into your bank account, what's already taken out? Income taxes. You've already paid income taxes, right? That's how a paycheck works. That's also how you would deposit money into a savings. You've already paid income taxes on that money. Or if you move money into a brokerage, you've already paid income taxes on that money. And that's that, right? Okay, so now compare that now to the second row here at the bottom. This is going to be your tax deferred account. So like your most common 401k, your SEP IRA, you know, this is the most common type of taxation. It's called tax deferred because your income taxes are quite literally deferred until later. You don't pay taxes on the money you deposit into one of these accounts. You pay taxes on the money you withdraw. And so it's kind of unique, right? Like imagine swiping your debit card for Panda Express and you have to pay income taxes on that money. It's kind of like that. But really what will happen is you'll withdraw, you know, whatever you need to live on for the year or for the month in retirement, and you'll need to pay income taxes on that money. The idea here is that you will be spending less as a retired person than you are earning as a working person, and therefore in a lower overall or effective tax bracket. And so it's better to actually pay those taxes later. Because what you can do now is avoid paying income taxes at your highest marginal rate. Our taxes are taxed on like a little stair-steppy up, right? So like for your first, $0 to $10,000 of income, we are all taxed at 10%. For your next, whatever, 20,000 in income, we are all taxed at 12%, no matter how much money you earn. And it keeps stepping up. But with a 401k or a tax deferred account, you're basically lobbing that off the top of whatever it is you earn. So you are avoiding taxes at your highest marginal tax rate. And so you get to avoid taxes at your highest marginal rate and pay them instead later on your effective tax rate, because it's working from the bottom up as opposed to taking it off the top. And so the idea here is like, especially if you're earning a lot of money in a year, you can bypass income taxes on any money that you put into a tax deferred account and just shirk that responsibility and pay those taxes later. Now, a Roth is a little bit different, and I'm going to show you that next, but I want to talk to you about something else that is happening here, because like this may surprise you, but this benefit does not necessarily excite me, because what you are not avoiding is paying income taxes. You're either paying income taxes now or you're paying income taxes later. There's not a way to avoid income taxes with retirement accounts. And so you're either paying them now or you're paying them later. Who knows what tax rates are going to be when we retire? That's something that we really can't predict. And so we're banking against something that we cannot reasonably predict in the future. And so whatever. You're paying income taxes either way. There is so much splitting of hairs within the financial education industry on like what is going to be the absolute most tax advantageous way to do this. And the reality is we can't know because you're comparing it against a future unknown variable. And so don't stress out over should I do tax deferred or should I do Roth? Just do something, because either way you're paying income taxes. And the real benefit, in my opinion, the real benefit to using any retirement account is actually what is happening within the account. So let's say you went down to a brokerage bank and you opened up a brokerage account. Like you went to Charles Schwab, you opened a brokerage account, and you bought a stock for $10 and then you sold it later for $50. You just made a profit of $40. So guess what? Uncle Sam is gonna find you and you are going to need to pay a capital gains tax, right? You found a way to make money, so you're gonna have to pay taxes on it. Unless you are investing within a retirement account. And to me, this is the primary benefit, is you don't have to pay this additional tax. Any money you earn investing will not be taxed in this additional way, right? Because we're really dealing with two different types of taxation. We're talking about the income taxes, which you're paying either way, but we're talking about another additional tax, capital gains tax, which you're not going to be paying as your money grows. So we call it like tax-free growth within a retirement account over time. Next, let me show you a Roth IRA or Roth 401k real quick. Here, it's a little bit of a hybrid of the both. Here, the money is going to be taxed going in. You are going to be paying taxes as the money goes in, but then you're never going to pay taxes again, not on the money you pull out and not on the investment gains. And so no matter where you land, the good news is you are circumventing this additional type of tax. And this is significantly more important because, again, you'll notice you're paying income taxes either way. Roth IRAs were actually initially designed for lower income earners. The idea being like, hey, I'm kind of already paying a low effective tax rate, so I might as well just pay the taxes now, get them over with, and not have to worry about them ever again. And this is probably the favorite of like most personal finance gurus that I know. And it's kind of a trade-off, right? Like you actually probably will pay less in taxes with the 401k or other tax deferred account, but there is something that's really nice and sweet about just getting the taxes over with, so you don't have to worry about it when you're an old lady, right? Because we're already in a bit of a retirement savings crisis. And then what you got to tell me, you got to pay taxes on the money that you withdraw as well. And so a lot of people are like, hey, you know what? I get it. Maybe it's not the most tax advantageous way, but I feel comfortable paying those taxes now while I am healthy, while I am working, while I am of sound mind, and I can. And so that's kind of the argument for and against. And just like really to summarize for you, like even again, if you kind of like just sit back and just like look at what's on the screen in front of you, like what you'll notice with like the Roth IRA here is that you're paying taxes in one way, right? In the red. Now let's go back here. What you'll notice with a tax deferred account is you're paying taxes in one way in the red. Now, if you were to invest within a brokerage account, what you'll notice is you are paying taxes in two ways. And so that's the real moral of the story. That's why these accounts exist. Basically, again, the IRS is like, hey, we'll throw you a teeny tiny little bone, right? So here's your bone. Here's how much money that you can put in. We're going to have limitations on who can use what, but we'll give you this tiny tax incentive if you actually use one of these accounts. Now, this incentive then comes with a whole set of rules. Like for tax deferred accounts specifically, you can't touch the money without penalty before age 59 and a half. Now, some of you might know some of the loopholes, especially for first-time home buyers. And so there are some ways around it, but generally speaking, I don't care. No matter which one of these accounts you use, I want you to treat it as if you really should not be tapping into money before age 59 and a half. Now, of course, in life, excuse my language, shit happens. And so it's understandable if you need to, but also plan for that and do that type of saving, that kind of contingency saving and emergency saving in a different account. These accounts are designed for long-term growth. Get that long-term tax-free growth. That's the point of using them. Don't put money in that you're going to penalize yourself when you have to remove it. And so that's the gist of the accounts. The tax part is always the hardest part. So you made it through the hardest part. Pat yourself on the back. Yay, congratulations. And so again, to help you remember, I'm going to show you a picture of David Lee Roth now. So this is this guy and nowadays. Like what you'll notice is he's already paid his dues. It's been taxed, y'all. He's paid his taxes. And so that's how you can help remember what is a Roth IRA and what is the difference between a Roth and a tax deferred. All right, next, let's actually start to move into the investing pieces, because at this point, we've got a bank account and it's sitting with its cash. Cash is just sitting in there, right? Now we actually need to invest the money. Or if the money is automatically being invested within our plans, let's understand what is the strategy that is going into my 401k automated investing, because you should know, you should absolutely know what is happening automatically. And so often what I notice is that when we think of investing, we often think of like the decision between two individual stocks. So like, should I buy Tesla stock or should I buy Microsoft stock? Right? If you were ever to turn on like cable news programming, like Squawk Box or like one of these, like they would have you believe that that is what investing is. In the grand scheme of investing, the decision to buy Microsoft stock or Apple stock is actually like your bottom of the funnel, your smallest decision. Because the most important decision that you're going to be making is your asset allocation decision, which is essentially just how are you allocating to the major different asset classes. Big picture, are you even investing at all? Are you doing stocks? Are you doing real estate? Are you doing bonds? Or are you doing nothing? Because the decision to invest or not invest is going to be the most significant driver of your actual investing returns over time. And so that's the first thing we got to do, is just understand the different asset classes so we can make an informed and educated decision about which one puzzle pieces together best with whatever it is that we are trying to accomplish. So we have to know that first and foremost. We have to make that big picture decision first. And again, I don't generally like to use jargon, but asset allocation is so important. And so I include that one in the presentation. And so when we're talking about investing within our retirement accounts, it really just boils down to two different asset types, stocks and bonds. Like I know when I first started working in investment management, I thought the world of investing was literally limitless. Like I thought it was never ending. And when they told me I actually only needed to know two things, I was like, yes, I can handle two. I can do two things. And so stocks and bonds are going to exist as the building blocks or as the core of your investment portfolio. Now, that's not to say that you can't look to integrate other asset classes, but that's investing 201. First, let's understand the interplay between stocks and bonds, because that is going to be like, once you understand the interplay between stocks and bonds, you can then use those same tools of understanding the relationship and apply them to other categories as well. Also, if you don't want to mess with anything more than stocks and bonds, you do not have to. I don't. I do a little bit of REITs, which is like real estate investing within the 401k, but otherwise it's really stocks and bonds. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, what about funds? Like, wait a minute, lady, what about mutual funds? What about exchange traded funds? Those are investment types. Sure, except a fund is really nothing more than a big old basket of some other type of investment. So it could be a big old basket of stocks, or a big old basket of bonds, or a big old basket of real estate holdings. But a fund is not an asset class in and of itself, right? If you buy a mutual fund that is invested, or that holds, I should say, stocks, then you are invested in the stock market. You are very much invested in the stock market. And so I think that this is often overlooked. Like we think that like the mutual fund like is its own thing, its own asset class, but no, it's actually just like a really convenient packaging tool. It's a convenient way to get exposure to different markets by being able to buy a whole bunch of different investments at once. They're kind of brilliant, and they've actually opened up a lot of opportunity to smaller investors, newer investors like myself, who may not be able to afford or want to build an entire diversified portfolio picking individual stocks. And so again, the funds themselves, they are just a basket. I have, like, if you check out my Instagram, a couple of posts ago, I was really proud of this post that I made where I compare funds to bouquets. Like a fund is a bouquet of many. If a single stock is just a rose or one single stem, then a bouquet is the fund of many different flowers. It's the bouquet of roses. And so, but still, at the end of the day, what's most important about the fund is what is being packed inside. It is so much more important than any other detail, because again, that's what you're going to be invested in. And so I like to compare mutual funds or exchange traded funds, same idea here, to a suitcase, where the suitcase is a really useful way to help a traveler get from point A to point B. Right? It's packaging all of the things together, because can you imagine trying to get through an airport without a suitcase? It would be very difficult. But what is packed inside that suitcase is actually going to be what dictates that traveler's trip, right? So let me give you two examples. So first, consider traveler one, traveler A. Inside of their suitcase, they have Mardi Gras beads. They've got like a creepy eyes wide shut mask. They've got a wizard's cape. Like, okay, where are they going? That looks fun. Can I come? It looks like a good weird time. Sign me up. Now compare that to traveler two. In their suitcase, they've packed earplugs, a cable knit sweater, a nice long read that they picked up at the airport, right? Clearly, these two people are about to have very different trips. And it's the same idea with a mutual fund. With what is packed inside is the most significant part, the most important part. And that's going to be what really dictates the flavor of the investing journey that you are about to have. And so always, anytime, if you're using a fund, you got to crack that bad boy open and see what's inside. And so quickly, let's go through a quick review of bonds and stocks. Sorry, just checking time. Of bonds and stocks. So a bond is essentially a contract with a company like Coca-Cola, or with a government, whether it's the federal government or a local government, where we quite literally loan them our money. Think of like a mortgage loan, but in reverse. We are the bank now. We loan them our money, and then they pay us a stated rate of interest for the pleasure of borrowing our money. And so that rate of interest that they are paying on their debt is the money that we earn as an investor. And so that's why bonds are also sometimes referred to as fixed income, because it's a contract that everybody agrees to. It's a fixed rate of income. Everybody knows what they're getting themselves into as they enter into the agreement. Historically, bonds have returned about 5% per year. Moving forward, we should probably downgrade our expectations, because that historical number takes into account that historically interest rates have been much higher than they have been in recent history. And, you know, I'm no soothsayer. I can't tell what's going to happen in the future, but my hunch is that we will more or less keep interest rates pretty low, which is a good thing if you're a borrower, but it's a tough thing if you're trying to earn a rate of interest on your bond, if you're trying to earn a rate of interest on your cash, right? And so we should probably downgrade our expectations moving forward. Who really knows? Maybe you can earn 2-3% on bonds moving forward. Now well, and I should say, so you might be picking up that like it's kind of considered to be like a more stable, predictable investment because you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Compare that to a stock. So like I mentioned, a stock is a teeny tiny little sliver of ownership in a company. So folks like us, we can quite literally invest in companies like Target or Tesla or Snapchat, who brought us this filter, or the company that made the Roomba, or Starbucks, who brings us the pumpkin spice latte. Is it still pumpkin spice latte season, or is that over for Halloween? Oh, no, it's got to go through November. So basically the idea is, every time basic bees like me go and buy pumpkin spice lattes because I love them, like, you know what? Okay, great. But like, let's also profit off the fact that we're all buying the pumpkin spice lattes. The idea is that with my share of ownership in Starbucks or whatever company it might be, that as they profit and as they grow wealth and as their whole pie grows, my teeny tiny little piece of the pie grows as well. Because a share is a percentage ownership. It's a teeny tiny little percentage ownership, but it's a percentage of ownership nevertheless. And so it's almost easier to think of like, imagine if Starbucks only had 10 shares available. I mean, they have millions, but imagine if they only had 10 shares and you bought one share. And so no matter what, no matter whether the prices are rising or falling, no matter what, you still own 1 out of 10 shares of Starbucks. You still own 1/10 of an ownership in Starbucks, right? And so keep that in mind, especially when we're talking about price volatility. No matter what the price is, you still own the same amount of that company. And so with a stock, there's really 2 ways that you can earn money. The first is through that little piece of the pie growing over time. That's what we normally think of when we think of stocks. Like who amongst us hasn't been like, wow, sure wish that I invested in Apple stock when it was still nothing but a company and what's his name? Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name? His mother's garage or wherever it is that he launched Apple. Like that explosion of growth that we've seen since then, that is price appreciation, your price growing or appreciating over time. But there is another way to earn money in a stock, and that's through what is called a dividend payout. A dividend payout is basically just that same company paying out money to all of the shareholders, basically just like, hey, you, thanks for being a homie. Thanks for being a shareholder. Here's a little bit of cash because I want you to be happy. I want you to keep hanging on, right? And so it's just really a cash payment. It's just like a thank you. And so between price appreciation and a dividend payout, you get a stock's total return. I should say about dividends, companies are not required to pay dividends. Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them are on regular schedules, some of them aren't. But overall, when we're looking at the total value of the entire stock market, we're considering both price appreciation and dividends for total return in the market. Just so you know, stocks are often referred to as equities because you essentially own equity in the company for which you bought a stock. The stock market in general has returned about 10% per year over history. Once again, we should probably downgrade our expectations, and moving forward, maybe we see something closer to 6, 7, 8%. And there's some reasons for that, which we won't be able to get into in this call, but it's just always good to be more conservative with your estimation. Like hopefully we get 10% returns moving forward, but maybe we won't, and we don't want to bank on that. And so be a little bit conservative in assuming that. Here's the other thing about that 10% returns is it is not being delivered to you in a pretty little package of 10% each and every year. That's just not the way that the stock market works. In fact, like imagine this is like Nike stock or something. Like this is like a traditional growth path. What you'll notice on this graph like this is there are going to be some years that are going to be positive, some years that are going to be negative. Growth in business and therefore growth in the stock market does not happen in a straight line up, never. And so that's part of the deal with investing in the stock market is it's a higher rate of return or potential for return, but you got to put up with this. You got to put up with this volatility. This can also be a graph of the total stock market's growth over time. We say that the stock market moves in cycles, and what that just means is that it's up and then it's down. It's up and then it's down. And that's actually really normal and natural part of the stock market growth cycle, right? Like you can almost even think of it like a human life, right? Like 2020 was nobody's like best personal year, right? Or maybe it was, which if it was, good for you. And so, like a human life, we're not going to have our greatest gangbuster year every year. And so instead, we're going to have like more of like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back type of trajectory. That's just the way business is. And you all know business, you run your own businesses, so you understand this intuitively. But we lose sight of this when we're dealing with the stock market, because it can be really rattling to see this volatility actually take place within our precious nest eggs. And so you have to be prepared for this volatility. It cannot be avoided if you are investing in the stock market. Because really in the stock market, we've got 2 trends happening here. The market is in the short term, up and down and up and down and up and down, and it can feel like you're getting nowhere. 10 years goes by and it feels like you're treading water. That does not mean the stock market is broken. The stock market just takes a little bit longer than we would generally like to work its magic. And that brings us to trend 2, is even though there is short-term volatility, what you see is that eventually the stock market does turn and move higher and grow in value. You just have to give it enough time. And so that's a perfect segue into our next building block, which is that investing is always going to be a risk and reward trade-off. Risk and return, or risk and reward, are 2 sides of the same coin. If you walk away from this course or this class understanding nothing else, I would love for it to be this: you do not get to have returns without some risk. The market wouldn't allow for it. The market would price that out in a heartbeat, right? And also think of any time you've heard of like a too good to be true type of investment where there's no risk and all reward. Like, what is that? That's a scam. In order to achieve a rate of return that is higher than just like what you're earning in your bank account, your 0.3% rate of interest in your bank account, you're going to have to take some risk. And in the stock market, that risk comes in the form of short-term volatility. And so I actually like to compare, I like to make a comparison to my dating life. I date men, so I'm going to use men as an example. Of course, I know not everybody dates men, but just bear with me. Also, men are really fun to make fun of, let's be honest. So imagine 2 different guys that I'm dating. First is guy number 1. His name is Steve. He's a nice guy. He's an accountant. He does tuck his t-shirt into his jeans, and he thinks that Nickelback is hard rock, right? Like, he'll be there when you get home on a Sunday to watch some boring Ken Burns documentary, but you're not exactly sailing around the Mediterranean and going to Ibiza on your anniversary, right? That's guy number 1. That's Steve. Then we have guy number 2. Guy number 2, well, his name actually happens to be Guy. Now, Guy is the lead singer of an up-and-coming band. This band could turn out to be the next Smash Mouth, but it could also turn out to be the next Rolling Stones. Dating him is a roller coaster. You might have to hawk some t-shirts out of the side of his airbrush tour van, but you could also be riding an albino tiger around your Miami Beach courtyard while you light your Newport Slims with $100 bills, right? With bonds, you kind of know what you're going to get, but there is limited upside. With stocks, you really don't know what you're going to get, but there is so much more potential for growth. And so that's why it's recommended for most people, do a little bit of both. Diversify. Diversification is really nothing more than playing the field, right? Like, I don't have to get married to either one of these guys, because sometimes this one's going to be better and sometimes this one's going to be better. And so I like to have a little bit of both around, because I don't have to commit to either one. They both bring something different to the table. And so then the question is, and I know we're coming up on time. I was allowed to go a teeny bit over, so I'm going to go just a teeny bit over, but I promise that I'm wrapping up here. With stocks and bonds, the next question then is, okay, well, so how much should I be investing in one or the either? How do I determine my asset allocation that's right for me? And really the way that we do that is take a look at your goals for your money, your risk tolerance, and your investing time frame. We do that, and then we can puzzle piece that information together with the options that exist out there. Because here's the reality about investing. There's a very limited amount of options that exist. So we have to just figure out which investment type or which combination of investment types is going to help us accomplish our goals and remain within the bandwidth of our risk tolerance. And so let me give you a quick example of this. It's really easy. So with a short-term goal, like I want to save up for a down payment. I am saving up for a down payment. That's a short-term goal. So I ask myself, like, what's my goal? Well, I want to use it for a down payment. what's the time frame? Let's say I want to use it within a year or 2 years. And what kind of risk am I willing to take with this money? Honestly, none, because like I want to be able to use it when I need to use it. And so I'm going to keep that money in cash in my high yield savings account. Next, compare that to retirement or financial independence or financial freedom. So when we're saving and investing money for the long term, what's our goal with that money? Well, the goal is to not run out. That's the goal of the money. And so therefore, our goal right now with our investments is to grow it as much as prudently possible without taking exorbitant risks. Okay, what's the time frame? Well, for me, I'm looking at retirement maybe in 30, 35 years. Maybe it's a little bit different for you. But like I said before, I'm planning to invest for the rest of my life. Now, what kind of risk are we taking, like with this money? What's the biggest risk? Well, the biggest risk with retirement money, which is actually a little bit counterintuitive, the biggest risk is that we don't have enough, that we run out. And so there absolutely is a risk to our inaction now, to not taking some risk. There's risk in doing nothing, especially when we have these longer time frames for which we can make the stock market work in our favor. Really, the only way to make the stock market work for us is to give it its sweet old time. That's essentially the only requirement for stock market investing. And so there are definitely like rules of thumb that you can use, like, take 110 minus your age. That's how much you should have in stocks. So if you're 30, 110 minus 30, that's 80% stocks, 20% bonds. But that is just a rule of thumb. Maybe you are somebody like me who is extremely comfortable with the stock market. And so I do something more like a 95-5. But that's me. That's my personal comfort level with the stock market. You might be a little bit different. You might think, you know what? I'm not comfortable with the stock market at all, which, like, fair, to be honest, totally, totally fair. And so you might want to start with something that's slightly more conservative. Maybe it's a 60-40 or 50-50 or whatever it is that makes you comfortable sticking with that stock piece and not losing your head when the stock market gets rough. Now, I know that I'm already over, so I should definitely wrap up, which is too bad because I love the basics of the stock market, but you can come and find me. Come find me, and we can do, like, I've got all sorts of events that I'm always doing where I'm teaching people about investing. And so I'm just going to skip right through this. But really, like, the idea with stock market investing is we cannot control volatility whatsoever. And so release yourself of the responsibility of worrying about your stock market return performance in the short term. Like, I actually think it's kind of a beautiful thing. Like, so much of our money management on a day-to-day basis requires so much upkeep and so much work. But to be a successful stock market investor, you actually don't need to do anything except for just you keep adding money in, knowing that the most important thing you can do is spend the maximum amount of time in the market so you can catch all of those upswings. So really, you just got to keep adding money in and then wait a really long time. And so how do you actually then fulfill, like, let's say this is your asset allocation. Like, this is, you decided for you want to do an 80-20, 80% stocks, 20% bonds, split between US stocks and foreign stocks. Okay, like, great, that's my asset allocation, but how do I actually do it? And so there are lots of different ways. A really popular way is to just buy index funds that represent each of these different categories. So like one US stock index fund, one foreign stock index fund, one bond index fund. That's not the only way to do it. If you have access to like a target date fund, which is like one of those funds that has a super far off date in the future that is supposed to correspond with your retirement date, those are really great. I would say, though, please do look for the index variety. Index generally means unmanaged, there's lower costs, and you're just trying to return the average of that market. No funny stuff, no funny business. Which, if you want to learn more about like index funds versus the alternative, which is like an actively managed fund, then I definitely encourage you to come find me, talk about it on my Instagram all the time. I also have a class, but like index funds are definitely the favorite of financial professionals. People that know what they're doing, they're investing in index funds or using some sort of strategy that uses index funds. So for example, if you were to start with a Wealthfront, Betterment, Ellevest, or any of the robo-advisors, what you're basically paying for a service where they buy you index funds to fit an asset allocation that makes the most sense for your goals. And so at the end of the day, the decision to do a robo-advisor or not a robo-advisor really boils down to, okay, like, should I just buy the index funds myself, or should I pay somebody to buy the index funds for me? And that's really the service that a robo-advisor is providing. If you're feeling like, you know what, I could use a little bit of hand-holding to get started, like, I know paying a fee isn't ideal, but it's certainly better to use a robo-advisor and to get started and to do the work of investing than to sit on the sidelines, you know, to be like sitting on your hands thinking that at some point you're going to do it yourself, because maybe you don't ever take the initiative and do it yourself, which, like, we can be honest with ourselves, like, about taking on one more thing. And so I personally use an index fund strategy. I should say I am not making recommendations. None of this presentation it constitutes personal financial advice. If you have questions as it pertains to your own personal situation, please do consult a certified financial professional that can get to know you and to understand what it is that you are trying to accomplish. And so just do know that none of this is advice for you specifically, because I don't know you, but I personally love an index fund strategy. And so do it for you, do it for your future self. You don't have to know everything to get started. You're going to figure it out along the way. If you're already doing it, which I imagine a ton of you are, then good for you. And maybe it's time to, like, make adjustments, make sure that it's really doing, your portfolio is doing everything possible to be best suited to accomplish what it is that your goals are. So for example, like, are we paying any unnecessary fees? Let's check that, because the goal is to make you rich, not the banks rich. And so I encourage you to do a little bit of investigating there. And so that's it for the presentation today. Again, for free investing education, I would love if you followed along on any of my journeys. I'm, like, trying to be on TikTok, but, like, I don't know, I'm an elder millennial. It's very hard for me. Instagram is kind of still where it's mostly going down, but I do all sorts of stuff on all the usual spots. Also, so you know, I do have a more in-depth investing course. It's a 15-part video series. It's 11 hours. And so, like, it's like this 1 hour, but, like, times 11. So I know it's like a lot of time with Dumpster Doggy, but, like, we actually go into each of the topics. We talk about the pros and cons of each of the different investing strategies. And calling it Investing 101 is, like, maybe a little bit of a disservice, because, like, you will walk away being, like, just fully confident in your own investing plan. And so if you're interested in that, I'll share the link here in a second. I would love, love, love to have you. And I do have a discount code that's going to be active for, I think, another, like, week or two, and it's SAVE50. So it's $50 off the price of the course if you're interested. SAVE, SAVE 50, all caps. And so would love to have you there. Also, there are office hours with me on the course, so you can actually ask me questions about applying the material to your own personal situation. And so really quickly, I'm going to stop sharing really quickly so I can jump in the chat. I know I'm really approaching that time line, but I want to give you a couple of things. So first, here is the, oh, hold on. Let me send it to everybody. Oh, shoot. It's not giving me the option to send it to everybody. Oh, everyone in meeting. There we go. So here is the link to the actual course. And then I also want to give you those 2 free workshops if you have more questions on what type of account you should be using. So there's one for self-employed people, and there's one with people with a traditional workplace situation. Okay, let's see if these go through. Okay, yeah, so those are your 2 free workshops if you want to learn more about which account to use. And so thank you everybody so much. I'm so sorry I didn't have time for Q&A. Again, come find me, come follow me. I'm always doing these types of events and trying to answer people's questions as much as possible, so we can get that money, ladies. Yay, thank you all. Okay, I guess I leave.
Thank you so much, Amanda. We really